Happy Draft Eve and welcome to a brand new episode of the Front Office Playbook. My name's Mike G, filling in for the iconic Colin Henderson, and joining me today are my esteemed cohorts, Eli Danson and Adam Datema. Fellas, we are one night away from probably one of the best days of the year. How you feeling?
Oh man, I am a lifelong Rams fan. So for the first 10 years of my true football fandom, the draft was my Super Bowl. I know you guys as Packer fans cannot relate to that, but the draft every year was what I could get excited for. So I love the draft. That has persisted even through the Rams actually getting good, really through the draft. A lot of it too. Les Snead, all the love in the world for him. He was there even back when they were bad, and he turned it around. So I love the draft, always will.
Oh yeah, it's the best day of the season. It's better than the Super Bowl. It's just the possibility and the potential of picking these young, talented kids essentially to join your favorite team and hopefully cheer them on for the next 10 years. I remember being at the grocery stores in central Wisconsin and buying the Athlon Sport magazine and reading through the scouting reports and then going to the cheerleader section in the back. And then coming to where we are now of just the amount of tape and material we have to be able to digest and know these players front and back and what they can add to our team. When I was in college, I had this friend who I was sitting on the couch watching day three. It was like the sixth round. And he's like, anybody who was watching the third day of the NFL draft has a problem. I said, you're right, but it's a good problem to have. So I can't wait.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the sports equivalent of Christmas Day. We're waiting to see what's underneath the tree, what's wrapped up in packages, and, who are we going to be talking about for the next year, 2, 10 years if you're me and you're complaining about TJ Watt not being a Packer. But we at the Front Office Playbook are here to talk through every major move around the NFL with a highlight on the most important position in all of sports, the general manager. Some can play and some can coach, but few can put together a championship roster. So be sure to hang out with us on all of our social channels as we follow the NFL GM schedule from offseason to draft and from OTAs to kickoff. As we hone in on the final hours of the upcoming NFL draft, we're focusing today on everything pass defense. So we're going to break down some of our favorite defenders in this draft, some names you may recognize and others that might surprise you. We'll focus specifically on defensive backfield as well as some edge rushers and off the ball linebackers. We'll highlight which defenses are under renovation, which ones are looking to improve an already embarrassment of riches, and which defenses are a piece away from glory, much like the Eagles from last season. We'll discuss how certain teams should game plan around the defensive side of the ball. So, with all that being said, let's start off with our first category. Guys, take me through who are your draft class darlings, your favorites from this one, and we're going to start it off with Eli.
I will start right at the top of the board. Will Johnson, to me, has Darrell Revis like college tape. Not saying that he's going to be Darrell Revis. When you're watching him on film, especially the 2023 tape, his ability to shut down an entire side of the field is such a unique ability that he has that Revis had coming out of Pitt in 2007. And he shares some similarities in his movement, in the way when you watch him, he isn't the most dynamic athlete on the field, but he's the best football player on the field. Mike, you and I as Packer fans know that he won't be on the board for us then, but his ability to just shut down the side gives defensive coordinators so much flexibility in the way that they can call Mike Minter when he was at Michigan, what he was able to do with the rest with his pass rush and sending bodies because he knew Will Johnson had that side of the field on lock. Specifically, his ability to not waste steps in his drop back and be in control so he can mirror the receiver is I think his superpower on the field. He is always in balance. He's always in phase with the player that he's covering. And in the Big Ten, in those big games, covering the Ohio State receivers, he was fantastic in those moments. So I love his tape against future NFL receivers. This last year, he was injured. The team wasn't good. He didn't try as hard. And that is a concern for when times get tough, but not anything to prevent him from being top 10 talent in this class.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the words that stuck out during the evaluation is his smoothness. right? He's smooth in coverage. He's great at mirroring. He might not explode as well as maybe some other prospects, on the ball or on the receiver, but he will follow you step for step. Adam, talk to me about some of your favorites as well. Who's your top favorite one this year?
Yeah, so I'm not saying some complete unknown, but he is maybe a little under the radar in Andrew Makuba, safety out of Texas. So he spent a few years at Clemson and transferred over to Texas, and they had him, Jade Barron. They had great safety or secondary over there at Texas. So he is small. That's the concern. But what surprised me most about watching his tape is that he has kind of this reputation as he's a small guy, but he's a spark plug, and he's just gonna fly around the field and just deliver these big hits, and he can do it. And of course, we get into a conversation of can a small guy continue to deliver big hits in the NFL? I personally think he can because even when he didn't deliver the big hit, he still completely tangled up the ball carrier and was able to bring him down or at least slow them down. So he is more than just a bat out of hell, hit the guy as hard as you can and see what happens. But what really surprised me about watching his tape was, despite that reputation, he really did have a controlled aggression. He was really patient. He seemed to understand the game. And overall, he is going to have to adjust to the physicality of the NFL. That's just the reality of being an undersized college player coming out. But I saw enough from the film of his mentality beyond the aggression, more mentality in terms of understanding the defense, and physically he can hold up as well. And with the way defenses are kind of going now, safeties are being devalued some, but it's almost because the value of two safeties is now becoming split among the value of three safeties. Like teams are starting to use three safeties a lot more to make their defense more multiple. And I think in that world, Andrew Makuba is absolutely worth a second round pick because he can be that second safety or that third safety for you right off the bat. He is going to be a special team star because of his attitude and because of just, kind of his awareness beyond just, again, just this super aggressive guy that doesn't know what he's doing. So I think in today's world where safeties are becoming, more multiple and versatile in the defense, he brings a lot of value, especially on day two.
You make a good point there, Adam. When you're looking at the way the defenses are evolving, right? Like I think of Cowboys safety Deshaun Overshown, right? He's a guy that's playing
Love
this
him. Yeah.
hybrid linebacker safety position, and then even before we started, Eli and I were talking about Evan Williams, who's a guy that's been drafted as a safety for Green Bay, but now he's playing more of this hybrid single high look, or he's playing in the slot as well. So there's a lot that's being asked of the position, and it's arguably one of the tougher positions to play on the defensive side of the ball because in most cases you are the last line of defense, right? It's that's why they call it a safety because it's you're the one that's protecting the back end or you're protecting the end zone there, and you're also the one that's seeing the entire field. So interesting to see how it continues to evolve. Whether we're going to get more of these tweeners, in the draft and in future drafts as well. Eli, you and I, speaking of actually the last podcast, so you and I were debating on what Green Bay should do with the 23rd pick, and I see someone on your list here. It's one of your favorite pass defenders, and it was a guy that I like because I felt like he would fit the mold of a Brian Gutekunst pick. So tell me a little bit about Azareye'h Thomas.
He was a guy I hadn't watched a ton of until our mock episode. Please go back and take a listen. And apologies for some of the audio on that. So he was a guy I hadn't watched a ton of. And in preparation for this pod, I was pleasantly surprised with his physicality and his ball skills. I knew some of his measurables before watching the tape. He's a 4.58 guy, doesn't have the greatest 10-yard split, and cornerback is a stopwatch position. You need to be an elite athlete to have a realistic chance at being a top tier corner in the league. But specifically, he really knows how to play as a big corner. This is something that Sauce is especially good at for the Jets, using his length and using his size. And he's got more mass and weight than Sauce does. I think he uses that really well. His foot speed is pretty slow. When you watch a guy like Makuba just glide along the field in the pace, you think of Kyler Murray running like the Roadrunner, that sort of foot speed. Thomas is not that sort of athlete. He's a bit more of a plotter, but I just loved his ability to be an intimidator on the outside. And you could tell receivers in their routes were hesitant going inside on him just with his ability to contest at the catch point. So they were surprised by him. I don't think he's a first round talent, just athletically. But I was pleasantly surprised as a second round corner and a guy to cover someone like George Pickens or some more kind of larger possession receivers. Think he could really carve a niche for himself in the league for 7 to 10 years.
Yeah, he's a guy that you could see going to, San Francisco in the second round, maybe with a high second round pick. Would do very well in Robert Sala's defense. I think, and not to get too far over the skis here, but I think we've also talked about, the potential of Will Johnson playing for San Francisco as well, getting drafted there. He's a guy that plays really well again with people in front of him, maybe a little bit more zone oriented, whereas Thomas a little bit more man oriented. Has the measurables for sure. You can't coach height, and that's one thing that
Yeah.
they tell you can't do. So, it's going to be really interesting to see. Like you said, probably not a day one pick, but where he's going to land in day two. So, speaking of fringe day one, day two picks, Adam, I'm going to kick it over to you. You have a really interesting linebacker prospect on your list of your favorite defenders, and why don't we talk about Carson Schwarzenegger out of UCLA?
Yeah, yeah. So again, similarly to Makuba, not someone totally under the radar, but someone who isn't thought of as a day one pick, and I don't know that he necessarily should be. Um, he is a project. He's a he doesn't have a whole lot of lead in the pencil, as my D line coach used to say. But when I looked him up, he's like 240 pounds, which isn't light for a linebacker in today's game. So okay, he's 240 pounds, but he looks skinny. Started looking at a bunch of pictures. This guy has long legs, very long legs. And in today's NFL, where everything is about coverage, long legs helps. You got to be able to cover the field, reach that long speed, be able to hit every corner of the field. So that is honestly, with a few linebackers, what I was seeing in this draft. He, though, is able to use that speed a lot more efficiently than other people. So, where it really, really showed up was his ability to weave through traffic. And for a guy who's kind of lanky, to be able to move quickly through traffic, that was really impressive to me. When he gets to the ball carrier, he brings attitude. He seems to have very quick diagnostic ability. Overall, this guy just seems like he has the mental and the physical to play in the NFL. What it's going to take is, can he bulk up a little? Because, again, not a lot of lead in the pencil. He has the right attitude when he gets to the ball carrier, but he's not knocking a lot of guys back. So he is going to have to bulk up to bring a little more weight with those hits. I think, not knocking guys back could turn into getting run over when you switch from college to NFL. So it is a concern. Again, I wouldn't put him in the first round, but he's worth a shot. He's worth a day two shot for sure. If you need a linebacker, this guy, the tape he put out in 1 year after being mostly a practice squad guy, it was really, really impressive. So, he has the mental, he has the physical. Let's give him some time to adjust. Don't rely on him right away, but he's a good addition to any team.
Absolutely, and one of the biggest or one of the toughest transitions, right, from college to the pros is the weight room, right? It's getting your kids
Man
or
strength.
yeah, exactly right. You're going up against guys that are probably had their third kid and have insane amounts of dad strength. So changing gears here a little bit, Eli. Was there someone that you were surprised that you didn't like more? Was there someone that really just kind of maybe underwhelmed you throughout the evaluation process?
Yeah, let's have a conversation about Malachi Starks because I know Adam and I have slightly different viewpoints on his value and his ceiling. And before we started recording, we wanted to save it just to see where we both stand. So when I watch Malachi Starks, really solid player, instinctual, good tackler, good coverage, uh, and I watch him and I keep wondering, okay, what is his trait that separates him from other first round safeties that have been drafted in the last 5 to 7 years, and there was nothing specifically that stood out. And I went, wow, this guy could be a dynamic field tilter like Kyle Hamilton on the football field. We had posited the question: if you had Adrian Amos on the Packers with a little more juice, with 5% more juice, what round pick would you spend on a player like that? To me, a high second round pick is a great place for a player like that. Harrison Smith on the Vikings was kind of end of the first round safety. You're talking about a player like that who has been in the league for 12 plus years, and the Vikings do not regret that pick in the slightest. And again, a smart instinctual safety on the back end. Adam, I'd love to hear your thoughts about him and what stood out to you about Xavier or about Malachi.
Yeah, so I won't come on here and say that he's the next Ed Reed or anything. I do think there are some physical limitations to his ceiling. That said, I think his coordination and just mental game is going to keep him in the league for a long time. And I think, when I look at the first round, I'm thinking, are we drafting someone who can stay as a starter for, let's just say through a second contract? I see Malachi Starks as that guy. There are plenty of guys who are going to sign second contracts with teams, but in terms of being great players and knowing at draft time that they're going to end up signing that second contract, I think Malachi Starks is a safe enough pick because of his mental game that you can project he will sign a second contract with your team, and that he's not going to be honestly a huge, insane reset the market type of guy because he doesn't have those crazy tools. So you might even be able to get him for, let's say 4 years from now, you re-sign him for an $18 million a year deal. That's not going to be the worst contract 4 years from now. And he's going to be a good player that you have on your team for almost a decade. So I think that's worth a first round pick. One thing that stood out to me is just I saw almost no mistakes besides missed tackles against incredible athletes. And the two that come to mind are Dylan Sampson and Jalen Milrow. When he met those guys on the open field, they broke him off.
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to happen. Those guys are pretty
Tim
good.
Tebow ran over Joel Berry in college.
Yeah.
Like, it happens, right?
Yeah. So, that happens. I'm not going to knock him too hard.
No, for sure. I mean, what you're saying here is you have a guy who projects as your regular meal at the diner, right? When it's 7 o'clock at night and you're like, you walk in, you go, you know what? I'm just gonna have the burger deluxe medium well. You just know what you're getting. And I think to your point, right? If you want an Adrian Amos type guy, I think he was drafted in the third round by the Bears way back when. Whereas Harrison Smith it was a little bit higher profile coming out of Notre Dame. Two of my favorite safeties, really, but guys that will just give you exactly what you expect day in and day out. Adam, same question. Who underwhelmed you out of this past defense class?
So I'm going kind of similar to Eli, someone who not necessarily I hated, but was just underwhelmed with in Jihad Campbell. And this is after I mocked him all three of us mocked him to the Buccaneers in our mock draft episode. But I watched him a little more, and I just got this concern that he's just an athlete. And really, what made me think that was he seemed just hesitant at times. I bring up Schweschinger is that moving through traffic. And it was the exact opposite for Campbell. As great of an athlete as he was hesitant. He was kind of jumping around, going through traffic. And he wasn't making those huge hits where it's just like, okay, you see an outside zone developing. You see where the split is between O linemen doubling the D linemen, and they haven't moved off to the linebackers yet. So you can just shoot that gap and rock the running back 2 yards behind the line. he had the ability to do that and he had some opportunities to do it, but he just wasn't doing it. So it just kind of was a little concerning because he's had good coaching. Um, and if at this point it's still an issue, and I don't want to call him soft or anything, it really is more hesitant than soft. Maybe it's the mental game, but again, he's been starting for 2 years at Alabama. I just feel like those shouldn't be issues, and I thought they were. So I was a little underwhelmed by him.
Absolutely. And, if you refer back to our last podcast, we all mocked him to Tampa Bay. If
Yeah,
there's anyone that can really, coach that out of him, it would be Coach Bowles.
no
Uh, you
doubt.
know, so talking about teams, moving on to our next segment here. So we wanted to talk about NFL teams who need to improve the pass defense in the draft. This is a non-negotiable. We discussed some of the teams with the worst pass defenses in 2024. These were ones that you could probably walk on them and score a touchdown. We're talking about teams like Carolina, Jacksonville, New Orleans. And then we were throwing around some other ones. There were maybe that next tier up defenses, meaning they need to improve in order to stay where they are. Otherwise, they could find themselves sliding down in the rankings. So, Eli, why don't you kick us off here? What team needs to improve their pass defense the most, and how are you getting it done?
We'll start with the San Francisco 49ers. And this is less about who they were in 2024 and more about who they are in 2025. When you look at their statistics from the 2024 season, they were, not at all. They were kind of right around top 10 in passing yards allowed per game. Um, and you look at their PFF scores and coverage, they had strong coverage scores across the board. When you're looking at their current roster and who they have in the backfield, that's where the concern comes. So they have Trey Brown, who they signed from Seattle, who was not good, as one of their starting corners. They had Jair Brown and Malik Mustafa as their safeties. Mustafa showed potential as a rookie, but with his play style, the undersized Bob Sanders ball hawk, that player does not play 17/18 eventually games in the league. And Renardo Green was their second round pick from last year, and De'Mondre Lenore is their other outside starting corner. Green and Lenore were solid, not spectacular players last year. Green has some leeway in being a second round rookie. Being solid is a good place to be. So there's some potential there. But what I think is really interesting about San Francisco's defensive situation and the upgrade they need is they are not going to have the pass rush that they have relied on so often in the first Saleh era, and then that carried on once he left. Nick Bosa continues to get older, and they've lost Arik Armstead and their other impact defensive linemen. So the ability to stick to coverage longer is going to be something this backfield needs to consider. And so they have pick 11, 43, 75, and 100. They have 2 third-round picks coming up. I think this is an amazing spot for Will Johnson to land in the draft. We've seen what a solid defense can do with Richard Sherman in his first stint in San Francisco, what he was able to do with DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner for the Jets, and the way they were able to lock down defenses with star cornerbacks, and Saleh's ability to put them in positions to be successful. And so pairing Johnson and his zone man versatility that he has, I think makes a ton of sense. If they wanted to wait until the second round, a fit I love for them is Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, who was injured this last year, but he is physical through the catch point. He is an athletic marvel. When you watch him move on the field, he is clearly the best athlete on the field when he's playing. I think he's kind of twitched up like Jair was coming out of Louisville. He's just got a little more mass and weight to him. And I kind of mentioned this with Will Johnson, but playing in Notre Dame, one of the great parts of watching their tape is they are playing the toughest schedule in the country every season. So you get to see him paired up against future NFL talent. And when he was running with Marvin Harrison Jr. or Emeka Ibuka or any of the future NFL talent, he was locking them down. They had nothing for him. So he's a little more zone heavy than man, which also fits into some of Saleh's scheme. So Those are two players I think would add to this current defensive backfield, which is lacking in talent and could see a major drop off in their pass defense coming up in 2025.
Absolutely. And what a curious case San Francisco was, right? I mean, I feel like they kind of gutted the entire defense. I think about players like Travarius Ward, no longer there. Mufunga went to the Broncos. This is just a defense that's 2 years removed from a Super Bowl and 2 years removed from being one of the top 10 units in the league. I really like the idea of kicking off the rebuild almost in the same way that the Jets did. I think the San Francisco defense does it still lacks the talent that Jets defense had. Adding Sauce Gardner to the mix, I think Will Johnson coming into the fold, he might not have a DJ Reed as his Robin, to play that Batman role.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, a tall task in front of John Lynch and Robert Saleh this weekend. Adam, let's turn it over to you. Same question. Give me the NFL team that needs to improve its pass defense in this draft.
Yeah, so I'll go with the team that we all mocked Jihad Campbell to in our mock draft, and I'm going with different players than Jihad Campbell. I feel like having watched what I watched, I want to right what I feel personally is a wrong. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right now, Levante David's old. He's not there much longer. They
Well,
need
hold on a second, Adam. He's 35. I'm 35.
Levante David is really old, so they are going to need they're going to need to replace him soon. Um, but again, like I said, I have changed my opinion on Jihad Campbell, so I think maybe not looking for a replacement necessarily, but finding a running mate for now would be the best move. So I would look almost to the second round for Carson Schweschinger, who I already, waxed poetically about. I think he would be a great running mate for this year while he develops a little more of an NFL body next to Levante David. And then in a year or two, when Levante David is calling it quits, he can be a solid piece that either he turns into your main guy or you find another linebacker to pair next to, but he's good enough to be that number two backer and a solid piece for you going forward. So I think second round, Carson Schweschinger. I don't know how often we start with the second round of these, but we're writing a wrong, at least in my mind. So now going back to the first round, the Buccaneers, I don't think there's any one player that's just going to turn this secondary into a good secondary. What really helps them is that they have a great defensive front. We bring up Levante David, maybe they do add Carson Schweschinger, but up front they have Vita Vea, who's just stuffing everything, every run, whatever it is, and he can push the pocket on pass plays too. And then next to him, we got Kalijah Cansey now, who I think is entering his third year, and he had some injury concern, but he's really shown some good things, kind of what people were expecting of him coming out of Pitt. So he can get pressure consistently. Yaya Diaby out of Louisville a few years ago, he's shown, again, another guy who I believe got injured at one point, so hasn't made a name for himself, but when he's been on the field has been really good. And they signed Hassan Reddick. So they have the pass rush. If you're not going to be able to fix the secondary in the first round, let's find someone who's going to be able to take advantage of what our defensive front is getting us. And I think that is either Jahdae Barron or Malachi Starks. I think they have a hole at both safety and corner. I think Jahdae Barron would be the priority because I think he provides versatility in the fact that he can play on the outside. But if you find a team, and it's not necessarily the Buccaneers, but man, if you find a team where you can afford to put Jahdae Barron at your slot corner and have him there as a big safety slot corner, whatever it is, him in the middle with that aggression, that just playmaking ability, that would be so perfect. But I think if you get him or Malachi Starks, because of how smart Malachi Starks is, I think both of those players are going to be able to come in and not necessarily turn you into a lockdown defense, but turn you into a defense that can take advantage of the mistakes that your defensive front forces. So again, won't completely fix them, but will turn them into a defense that can help them compete overall as a team.
Absolutely. I agree. I think one of the, curses of having a high-powered offense that Tampa Bay had last year is that it puts a lot of stress on your defense.
Yeah,
It puts you in a position, and it puts the opposing offense in a position where they have to throw the ball. And now you have games like, the one that comes to mind, the Baltimore game, where Chris Godwin dislocated his ankle, right? It turns into an absolute shootout. Todd Bowles really needs to, and that organization, they really need to lean into a defense that will bend but not break. And they have a really good track record of second round or third round picks in their secondary. I think the one exception there would be Antoine Winfield Jr. Right, he's a guy who came with a very good NFL pedigree. His father was one of my favorite and least favorite safeties to watch play for the
Yeah.
Minnesota Vikings back in the day. But you look at guys that have come and gone. Sean Murphy Bunting's another one that comes to mind. He was just a nasty, aggressive guy. Always had his hands up, in your face on the ball. He was a very tough out. So, you know,
Carlton Davis,
Carlton Day.
aggressive, physical
Yep.
guy. Yeah.
But these were not guys. They were not first round picks by any means. I think they were second and third round picks. So, it's going to be interesting to see what Tampa Bay can accomplish here in day 2 and day 3.
Yeah, and I disagree slightly, Adam. A part of their difference, I actually really like the cornerback room in Tampa. Zion McCollum, Jamal Dean, Tyke Smith were all solid to better than that last year. As working with Fantasy Points did, I charted a lot of offenses that were playing against the defense, and the corners were consistently not allowing a lot of separation. Their issue was their safeties. When the corners did make a mistake, the safeties weren't cleaning it up for them. So I'm not a safety in the first round guy almost ever. Malachi, going there would make sense to fill the defense. But we had talked about him going to the Eagles in our mock draft. Xavier Watts, I think when you're watching his Notre Dame tape, a lot of his interceptions are coming off of cleaning up tip balls and deflections that his teammates are helping with, and he has the cornerback room to support him. You're not asking Xavier Watts to carry the vertical down the seam, right? But taking advantage of the opportunities that his cornerbacks are creating. I think that's one of the strengths of his tape. It would fit the cornerback room that he has in the probably second round for Xavier Watts if
Yes.
he's there.
So my thought with the Buccaneers in that sense, in terms of, I agree they have some solid talent in there,
Mhm.
but the way I look at them is kind of similarly to how I look at the Rams cornerback room specifically, much different safety rooms, um, in that we got to get a playmaker. Like they're solid right now, but I think Jade Barron or Malachi Starks would be the playmaker. And again, we could keep a bunch of solid corners, and I would like to add Malachi Starks again. I think he would be able to start taking advantage of some spots. Maybe Xavier Watts could do it in the second round.
Mhm.
Um, but I really just think adding playmaking ability to the defensive back room um, is what I think this defense needs. Because again, I agree with you that the guys in the room are solid. I'm just looking for a guy who can turn into great potentially.
Totally fair.
All right. With that being said, let's transition now into NFL teams that are just maybe a piece or two away from an elite pass defense and one that might get them over the hump. I think a lot about the Philadelphia Eagles last year, Quinion Mitchell in the first round, Cooper DeJean in the second round, and then watching Cooper DeJean return Patrick Mahomes' pass for 6 in the Super Bowl. Uh, so let's start this one off with Adam. You know, who is that team? And how do you get there? What are those pieces to put them over the hump?
Yeah. So when I look at teams that are a piece of way, and we are thinking about the Eagles were good. It wasn't like just their secondary was a piece of way. It was like, okay, if we fix the secondary, we are in championship contention. And to me, that's the Baltimore Ravens. Last year, the offense seemed to come together. Obviously, Derrick Henry helped. Zay Flowers really had a great year. Rashad Bateman stepped up more. There was just a lot going on that worked on the offense, and then the defense. It just seems the Ravens can never get both right at the same time, and so The secondary, to me, especially because they just re-signed, he signed his restricted free agent tender, Darius Washington. To me, that was huge because safety was something I thought the Ravens should target in the draft, and I think some people were mocking Malachi Starks there. I was thinking they should go a little later in the draft for a safety, but getting him back to me means okay. We got our Darius Washington locking down free safety. We got Kyle Hamilton locking down strong safety. Marlon Humphrey was fantastic last year when he went inside to slot corner. And then we got Nate Wiggins on the outside corner. If we add another outside corner to that group, that's five players right there that could potentially create a just lockdown secondary. And so, okay, going beyond the secondary, before we get to who we would add to that secondary, I want to look at the linebackers. Roquan Smith. All right, so great linebacker. We'll figure out the rest. Trenton Simpson's on there's some other guys who can filter in and out, but we have a stud linebacker. And then in the middle, the defensive tackles, Travis Jones and Nnamdi Madubuike. They have the center between Roquan and those two D tackles. They have the center of that defense locked down. The edge rushers are going to be the issue on the front of that defense. So right now I'm looking at outside corner and edge rusher. I think they have enough on the defensive front to where edge rusher doesn't need to be their main concern in the first round. They have enough players that are solid on the edge and then good on the interior that if nothing else, they can design some blitzes to get home when they need it. And they're going to be able to get consistent pressure otherwise. So I think first round, they need to go corner. And when I look at their division, I see some incredible wide receivers. I see now Pickens and DK on the Steelers, obviously Jamar and T. We see Judy, who's a good receiver, and probably going to add Travis Hunter to that as well. So there are some incredible receivers in the AFC North. They need an incredible corner. And Siobhan Ravel, I said this in our mock draft. I'm sticking with it after watching more film. I like him. He is not going to be a lockdown corner when he steps on the field. He needs to work on the technique, but he is tall, fast, and twitchy and sticky. And what makes me confident that he will be able to handle the lateral movement of the NFL is that he's patient. He doesn't have incredible lateral agility right now, but he has the patience to wait for receivers to declare themselves, and then he goes with them with his incredible speed. So the height, he has both height and ball skills, so that is just incredible to have on the outside. I think you add him to that Ravens defense, and this year it is just goes from, pretty good at the end of the year, but overall it wasn't great against the pass to just great overall start to finish next year.
Absolutely. And just for those listening at home, that's 2 games against Cincinnati. That's 2 games against Pittsburgh. That's the potential to play Buffalo every year, play Kansas City every year, potentially play Houston every year. And then if you look at rotating through the NFC, to have to run into the NFC North at any given point, or even, the Eagles or Washington every 4 years, you have to put a premium on defense, especially sitting in the AFC, sitting in the division that the Ravens sit in.
And yeah,
Yep.
last thing about Siobhan Ravel real quick. He's a Ravens type of player. He's tall, so he's got some decent weight, but he's skinny. Like 6'2", 194 or something. Like that's not thick or anything, but he throws himself in there against the run. And like I'm watching games of his where I look down at the ticker and his team's record is like 1-7, and he is flying in to like a ISO run up the middle. So like he's got that Ravens mentality too, I think.
Absolutely. So on Sunday, I'll make sure to order my Siobhan Ravel Ravens jersey for you, and have it in the. I'll be handing it to you
Yeah.
on the reaction call. Um, Eli, you and I think I know where you're going with this one. You and I are on the same page. Take it away. What's the defense that's one or two pieces away?
The Green Bay Packers. This unit in 2023 was unbearable to watch. Sitting there and watching Joe Barry play 8 yards off zone every single play, it just was infuriating. And the Eagles are an example of this. The Seahawks are an example of this. in the Packers of just the impact that a singular coach can make on a unit. And bringing in Jeff Hafley last year and what he was able to do with the talent level on that defense was incredible. This was the team that held the Eagles to the lowest points in the playoffs. This was a unit that had Keyshawn Nixon and Jair and Carrington Valentine starting at outside cornerback. This was a bottom 10 pass rush. And with all of those factors and combinations, this was a top 5 defense against the run and a top 10 defense against the pass. So imagining this unit with talent at those positions that the coordinator can actually use to, what Vic Fangio was able to do with the Eagles defense, to have the scheme and the talent match up. It's what we kind of wanted with Matt LaFleur on the offensive side of the ball with the Packers. The Shanahan offense has never had a quarterback to run the system. We'd always wondered what could a unit look like with a top-tier quarterback. We saw that with Rodgers for his MVP seasons. Looking at this team and the holes on their defense, the safety room is set. They have top-end talent and depth in Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, and Xavier McKinney. But again, they started Keyshawn Nixon and Carrington Valentine outside. They signed Nate Hobbs from the Raiders, who has primarily been a nickel cornerback. They plan to play him on the outside this year. We'll see how that goes. And one thing about kind of the defensive backfield is it's a weak link unit where it only takes one guy messing up for a player to be open and the play is dead. The other 4 defensive backs are doing their job. It doesn't matter, right? If the one cornerback is letting the exception. So having depth and pieces to fill in when guys inevitably get hurt is the ideal situation. So looking at where the Packers are picking first round, they have invested a lot of first-round picks in our lifetime in the cornerback position, with Jair, with HaHa Clinton-Dix, with
Eric
Stokes, Darnell Savage. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. If that's where Gutekunst wanted to go this year, and this has been an incredibly popular pairing, the last week is Maxwell Harrison, the cornerback out of Kentucky. He ran a 4.29 and a 1.49. He had a 39.5 vertical, and every single second of that time shows up on tape. His click and close is a blur watching him on the field. He also looks every pound of his 183 pounds on the field, which is why the pairing doesn't make a lot of sense just based off measurables that Packers have gone with in the past. The one player that they made an exception for was Jair. He was shorter and lighter than players that they normally take, but his mirror ability, his mentality and vigor on the backfield, and they need a true outside corner. And that's how Harrison plays. So that pairing, I think, makes a ton of sense and would be, Adam, as you said, the playmaker, right, to elevate this defense, to give them the chance to contend with the Eagles and the Commanders. And, someone to cover Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Someone to cover Justin Jefferson, someone for DJ Moore in the conference. Harrison would make a lot of sense. If I can add one later guy, Noel Williams is kind of the discount version of Maxwell. Noel Williams out of California. He had 7 interceptions this last year, and 6 of them were not gimmies. These were plays that he was making. He had a kickoff return for a touchdown, and over and over when watching his tape, he has my favorite singular skill that a college cornerback can have, which is patience as the ball is being thrown to him. So many cornerbacks, Eric Stokes is one of these guys where as the ball is coming towards them, you can see the panic in their eyes on the game film as the ball, and just their panic, and they tighten and they're not entirely sure how to play the ball. And when Noel Williams is defending a player and the ball is coming towards him, he's so patient and he's so calm. His ability to locate the ball and turn was awesome to watch. Another Packer mentioned Ahmad Carroll was like the opposite of this back in the day, just grabbing at the catch point, and that's not Noel Williams' game. He's a great athlete, and so 3rd, 4th round would be, I think, an awesome addition and skill set to play outside in this backfield.
Obviously with the controversy right now going on with Jair Alexander, if they were to somehow repair this relationship, does that change your strategy here? Are you still looking Maxwell Harrison, or do you try to bolster, like you said, one of the bottom 10 pass rushes in the league?
Great teams and great general managers are able to draft for the present and the future with the same pick. Right, that's what separates the top GMs from those who are below them. We think of or we're going to talk about them later, the Vikings, but the ability to draft the replacement. The Eagles had Cam Jurgens on the roster, who they knew was going to be their future center. They had a Hall of Famer in Kelsey, and they were able to draft him, find a place along the line to play him, maybe not in his natural position, but they got him on the field to learn. Kelsey retires, and they have one of the top centers in the league ready to go. Right, this is what great general managers do. So we're counting on Jair, who's hasn't played a lot of games the last 2 years to be the impact player, and they've had off-field concerns the last 2 years. Wouldn't prevent me from drafting an eventual replacement for him. Keyshawn Nixon only has 1 year left in his deal as well. We all know he's not the savior, so wouldn't stop me at all.
Absolutely. Love that answer. And, looking forward to tomorrow, excited to see how he follows up on 2024. Like we said, Evan Williams was a phenomenal pick to pair with Edrin Cooper and Javon Bolliard in that defensive backfield. So really looking forward to what Green Bay can do. Moving on to teams that have an embarrassment of riches on the defense, right? And the immediate ones that come to mind are teams like uh, Denver, Philly, and I would even say Kansas City to an extent. I think they play very tough defense. Steve Spagnuolo is one of the best coordinators in the league right now. But let's kick this one over to Adam. What team with an already good pass defense can get even better in this draft?
Yeah, I'm going a bit with a homer pick. And honestly, I don't know how the Rams' pass defense ranked last year, especially because I know the D line and defense overall got better throughout the season. But when we look at the Rams' pass defense, we also, have to make sure we remember how good this D line is. Byron Young is probably the worst player on it, and I think he had 9 sacks last year. Um, Braden Fisk, great rookie last year out of Florida State. Kobe Turner was, I think, second in the Defensive Player of the Year voting 2 years ago. Jared Verse was first in Defensive Player of the Year voting, or sorry, not rookie for all these, but last year Jared Verse was. So that already gives the Rams a leg up on pass defense in that they have those 4 D linemen that they can just trot out on any third down. Um, we look at the linebackers, they're decent. Omar Spates, he's fine. We're not going to focus too much on them because really the Rams, their defensive backs, the safeties are where it's at for the Rams. So Cam Curl came over from Washington, continued being great. Drafted Cameron Kinchins out of I believe Florida or Miami, and he in spurts was great. Wasn't as consistent, didn't get as much playing time because he's a rookie, but when he came in, he was great. And then Quentin Lake, just do it all safety for the Rams. Absolutely love him. Just making plays. I love safeties because it's not the down to down effectiveness that they have like other positions, but when they make plays, they're smart game changing plays. So the Rams have those 3 safeties, and outside of them, they have at corner Kobe Durant, Akella Weatherspoon, Darius Williams, and Darion Kendrick. And if you are a big time football fan, you've probably heard at least some of those names before, but you don't really remember them because they're not fantastic players and they're solid. If you've watched a lot of Rams games, you know that they're solid and that they can run the defense for you. But I am really hoping your Packers at, what was it, 23, I believe. Yes, I'm really hoping that they do opt for revitalizing that pass rush a little bit with someone young, because at 26, I think getting Maxwell Harrison on the Rams would be perfect. They have the great D line to put QBs under pressure. They have the great safeties in the middle to lock down with a good backer in there to kind of lock down, and then just get someone on the outside who can make some plays. And this Rams defense is as good as it was at the end of last year, it's taking another step.
Absolutely, and Adam, I really thought you were sincere in that. I didn't realize that you were trying to take Maxwell Hairston from us. So I'll take those wishes, at face value for what it's worth. But
Yeah,
wanted to thank you guys for the conversation today. That wraps it up for our show. For those listening out there, if you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss an episode in the future. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to rate and review us. And while you're at it, be sure to follow the Front Office Playbook on X, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch to be informed of all of our live shows, scouting videos, and more. So stay up to date on everything happening around the NFL and its impact on your team. Be sure to check back in soon for a brand new episode and be sure to reach out to us on X and tell us what topics we should tackle next. Until then, for Adam, Eli, and myself, enjoy the draft. And as always, thanks for listening.
see you.